I'm going to open our agenda for our special meeting tonight at 6 p.m. Monday, June 22nd, 2015. Can I have roll call?
Councilmember Clapp. Present. Councilmember Haney.
Here.
Mayor Lara.
Here. Councilmember Clapp, could you lead us on Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is a continued public hearing from June 8, 2015, the Wild Tennis Academy. Appeal of the Planning Commission approval of the application for modification to approve design review permit for expansion project DRP 11-05 RV02. I'm going to turn it over to our staff for a report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. Since we made a staff report on this at the beginning of the public hearing several meetings ago, we didn't plan on making another staff report, but Ms. Wold is here to answer any questions that you may have about the staff report that was made. I would like to have the city attorney bring us up to speed on events that have occurred since the time of the last continuance.
Yeah, that was the report I was hinting.
Yeah. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. Glad to speak to the issues. The first one I want to note is that we received a request from Susan Basham, attorney for the Clarks, on June 12th for Councilmember Clapp to recuse herself, citing various grounds. I think first the council member should speak to that request.
I feel comfortable staying and not recusing myself.
And I'll state for the record that having reviewed the previous meeting, having reviewed the assertions made by Ms. Basham in her letter of June 12th, it's my opinion that the council member need not recuse herself, that the statements asserted regarding did not present an unacceptable probability of actual bias. They spoke to the process in that night and to the statements made by a then unidentified gentleman regarding interruptions, and spoke to the need for not belaboring certain issues of the project. Nothing about the merits, nothing about the particular facts or biases in favor or against of any particular parties within the appeal. On that basis, it is reasonable to not recuse. With that, then we'll move to the next item, which is, as I understand it, the attorneys for the Wiles, Mr. Cohen, and the attorneys for the Clarks, Ms. Basham, have reached an agreement on a proposed additional condition that would be a modification of the condition number 40 that I drafted for you, that requires a screening wall and a set of 4 trees to be added on the Pope Lane side of the project, intended to provide a visual barrier from the line of sight from the property at 520 Buckboard Lane. The intention is that this condition is intended to be specific enough to not require a further trip back to the Planning Commission, but rather to be reviewed, to have the wall and the appropriate siting of the trees reviewed and approved by the Community Development Director, rather than requiring a further trip to the Commission or the Council. I'll let the public hearing, one of the two of them or both, speak to the exact language, because I think they were making my final adjustments a few minutes ago.
Okay. Should we bring them up then? Or
I would suggest opening the public hearing.
okay, I'll open the public hearing. And I do have speakers cards. Should we let them speak first or speakers?
We might take, I guess you might take the public speakers first and then follow with the counsel for the two parties.
So I'm going to start with, well, I have Tom Cohen here, but I think that's an attorney of Mr. Weil. So I'm going to go with Robert Myers.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Robert Meyer. I live at 550 Buckboard, so I'm right next to the Clarks. I'm really not going to speak too much against or for the particular project in place, but I wanted to bring council to be aware of this whole issue probably comes from a mistake that was made 30, 40 years ago when the original zoning was done, where you have an industrial zone immediately adjacent to a residential zone. If you think about city planning, that's not something you would normally do. You would have buffers of different types of zones between residential and industrial. So I would like to encourage council to actually direct to the Planning Commission, which I spoke to back in April, to re-review the current zoning requirements or allowability in the M1 zone there. For instance, right now, as a neighbor to that area, I don't have any particular issues with the neighbors. They're pretty quiet. They go about their business during the day. The night times are quiet, relatively dark. I'd like to see a few less lights, but yeah, that's something I can't quite deal with right now. But the current code, for instance, allows a 24/7 freight terminal to be in that zone. It's not one now, but boy, would that be noisy, and I certainly wouldn't like that. So why don't we take that out of the zoning code today? So that's something I would like people to think about, is how can we go back and relook at what was done 30 years ago, not erase it, but maybe tweak it a little bit to make it better for the future so that we don't run into even more problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Don Teeting?
Good evening, Dawn Teeting, North Signal Street. At the last special hearing for this project appeal on June 8th, the city attorney stated that in a court of law, failing to comply with conditions of approval that require archaeological monitoring for the protection of cultural resources would not be considered a significant violation of the terms of the project's approval. I respectfully disagree with this assessment. The California Environmental Quality Act provides protection for the environment. Cultural resources are our state's oldest resources, and they are non-renewable. The value to the tribe and the Ojai community is immeasurable, and the importance of protecting these resources is required under the City of Ojai General Plan. Violation of an approval condition to protect cultural resources is no different than putting an endangered species at risk or not taking precautions to prevent a pollutant from spilling into the environment. Building violations can be rectified. Destruction of cultural resources cannot. Please consider that condition of approval number 33 for this project require 1, both a qualified archaeologist and a native Chumash monitor, and 2, that contracts be signed prior to issuance of any building permit. These measures would ensure appropriate protection of Ojai's cultural resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Tumamaya?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Patrick Tumamite. I'm here to represent the Native Chumash community and also respond to a letter written by Mr. Scott Lowen. And it reads here, Dear staff and Mr. Rob Clark, for the record, I've never denied wanting to be hired as a Native monitor for the Wheel Tennis Academy project, nor did Mr. Scott Lowen contact me to meet with him at the property to discuss the hiring of a Native monitor to observe the earth disturbance activity for the project. Mr. Lowen's accusations and statements are false and misleading. I would like to add I've never received a call from the property owner, Mr. Weil, about the development or proposed building of the new addition to the property, nor have I ever met Mr. Weil on any separate occasion before that time. I also note that this project conditions of approval require that an archaeologist monitor all earth disturbing activity. I'm not an archaeologist. I'm a Native American Chumash consultant / monitor. Due to the lack of compliance with the previous conditions of approval to protect the possible cultural resources, I request that the Native Chumash monitor also be present with the archaeologist for all earth disturbance activities, and that the contracts be signed prior to the issuance of any building permits for this project. I would like to see that written into the approval and conditions before anything else proceeds.
Great,
And here's
thank you.
copies.
I'm going to invite Mr. Cohen and then Ms. Bashman.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Tom Cohen. I'm here on behalf of the Weil Tennis Academy and College Preparatory School. We've been in ongoing dialogue and discussions and negotiations with the appellant, Mr. and Mrs. Clark, and we have come to a resolution through modifications to the condition that was recommended by Mr. Summers. And maybe Ms. Basham would like to join me. But we've got language. We can read it into the record however you wish to have us address that. But we think that the condition should satisfy all concerns. We would then ask that you deny the appeal with this condition being modified to address the concerns that we've heard about. I've got nothing further to say. I do want to address the comment from Mr. Tumame. The mitigation measure that was identified in the mitigated negative declaration that was adopted in 2012 when this project was first brought to you, I'm going to read to you. It says, in the event that archaeological resources are unearthed during project construction, all earth disturbing work within the vicinity of the find must be temporarily suspended or redirected. That was in the mitigation. That was a mitigation measure. In the project conditions, however, condition number 33, it states that the owner applicant shall have all earth disturbances, including placement of fill, monitored by a city-approved archaeologist. There was clearly confusion between the two, the mitigation measure and the condition. I don't think there was anything done here in bad faith. But I can tell you going forward that we will have we will take all proper measures outlined in the conditions of approval and that were prepared back in 2012. That's our responsibility, and we will take that on.
And I'm glad you addressed that. And in your letter, also you indicated that you would have a Chumash tribe member. You're willing to hire also a tribal.
If that is a condition that was imposed on the project in 2012, we will comply with the conditions of approval.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Great.
Ms. Basham?
Yeah.
You want to?
Have another speaker here.
So.
I have a real quick question for Mr. Cohen. I think, did you just say that you would abide by the original conditions of approval and have whatever was required there present at any excavation?
Correct.
I think in the original conditions of approval, it's just an archaeologist, is that correct?
As I read,
That's what I'm
city
confused about.
says city-approved archaeologist.
Archaeologist. So a Chumash representative in the original
If
approval was not required.
if artifacts are unearthed,
Then they're required.
correct.
Okay. And would you be willing to have a Chumash representative there throughout, not just if anything's unearthed?
I don't know why we would need to do that unless something is found.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Beam.
Sorry for the late speaker slip. Craig Beam. I'm an attorney at law. I'm speaking on behalf of the Chumash tribe. Let me point out that in construction, the reason you have a Native American monitor is because construction people really aren't trained to notice whether or not they're unearthing Native American cultural resources. So there's a need overall to have, for example, a phase 1 or beyond study from a regular licensed archaeologist, but there's also a need for a Native American monitor simply because construction people are not trained as the Native American monitors are specifically trained, including Mr. Tumamate here and Julie Tumamate, the tribal elders, to serve that function. So there's a reason for a Native American monitor. Now, what I heard was that there was no acceptance of that as a condition of approval. That is the request of the tribe. Given the fact that the earlier conditions, as I understand it, were not met into the first phase, I think you'll understand why, from the tribal standpoint, it's important to have this condition of approval. Thank you.
Councilmember Haney?
Kathleen, do you want to talk to this at all? Do you want to speak to what is in the writing and what are the Wilds actually supposed to do?
Okay, it's, I just had those pages here. It says if, what Councilmember Clapp had to say, it's an archaeologist. So the archaeologist is trained, that's what they're trained in, that's their profession. So they would be out there, and so it wouldn't fall to construction people as long as someone's out there. Generally speaking, in the trade, the archaeologist will also usually ask the applicant who's hiring them if they feel to have a monitor, a Native American monitor out there, if they feel that they're not qualified. So it needs to be an archaeologist, that's well-schooled and well-versed in the tribe that's of the region. So if they weren't able to find someone, an archaeologist that is knowledgeable in Chumash artifacts, then they would need to have an archaeologist and a Native American monitor out there. That's usually how it's done. So it's kind of up to the archaeologist to say that they're not qualified. Then they would end up having to have two out there. If you follow what I'm saying.
So I just want to clarify this. We're starting construction on this project. I'm to have an archaeologist on site every day. I just want to be clear on that.
Okay, so you need to have so if you read the condition, it says, the owner applicant shall have all earth disturbances, including placement of fill, monitored by a city-approved archaeologist. So when they give us a contract from an archaeologist, we're going to contact that archaeologist or look into their history and say, do you feel comfortable? Are you knowledgeable in Chumash?
No, I'm not asking that question.
Okay,
I'm
yes,
just
they have to be out there whenever there's a ground disturbance activity.
Okay,
so that's,
and who verifies that? And who verifies that?
Well, as I said before, there should be we ask the applicant to provide us with a contract that they have someone under contract and that's going to be out there.
Right.
And then we've established a policy and with the building official that the building official will go out there and have what they call like a pre-construction meeting.
Okay.
To talk to everybody, this is what you need to do. If you're not doing this, we're going to come out and do a stop work order on the project.
Okay.
So, but generally speaking, it's usually rather quick. I mean, it's a week or two when they're doing their grading, and then and then again it would be when they're out there digging the footings and that type of thing. And then at some point, that all goes away, and we get an end of report, and construction starts building up above the ground.
Okay, so I guess what I'm going back to, there's no construction document that we require that they have to notify building and safety that they're going to open the ground. We have nothing in our requirements that require the Wiles construction company to do that. Am I correct? So what we're relying on is the Wiles general contractor to notify the archaeologists that we're going to go into phase 1 grading or our first level of grading, and that we would like you out here. That we're relying on that on that trust. Am I correct?
Sort of. I mean,
Okay.
we issue a grading permit. They come in to get a grading permit before they get that's the first permit they get.
I understand
Okay.
that. I just want to know, how do we know that they have an archaeologist on site? Can you tell me how?
The policy now is that they will bring in a contract, say they've engaged this person, and then before they're allowed to start activity, the building official is going out there and having a pre-construction meeting with them about who needs to be on site. This is all happening before they turn one shovel of dirt
Okay.
now.
Most recently, have we had anyone open the earth up in Ojai and not have an archaeologist or a Native American on
Yes.
site?
Yes.
Okay, so do you see what I'm talking to?
Oh, yeah, I see what you're.
Okay, I want to trust this man. I don't know him, but I want to trust him, and I want to trust his general contractor. But the reality of this is, there is no trust, because there's no verification. And the verification that even followed through is, they sent a letter 3 years after the fact from a general contractor stating that, yeah, we asked this person to come out, I want to remove the gray. And I don't know how to do it. I don't know if it's in our policies or our procedures, but I want to remove the gray. I want to remove the chance of any Native American relics, bones, or anything of that nature being disturbed by a general contractor who is not certified in any of that, or an archaeologist that is not certified in any of that. How do we do that? Help me to put that into some document.
Mayor and council members, I think a good step at this point would be for the city attorney to review the proposed condition that he developed for this situation. And it's a condition that can be worked on, depending on how you feel about it.
Thanks, Rob. And to speak to your concerns, which, as we've seen, are valid concerns, I think the way that this is accomplished is through the condition we've added, or I've proposed for adding, number 41, requiring a compliance plan for this condition. And what I think that compliance plan would look like is a requirement to have a signed contract in place before issuance of the grading permit. So that gives us a hook to, they come into the grading permit, we say, where's your contract? They don't have a contract, no permit. Then require reports on maybe a weekly basis from at least a check-in report as to what they've been doing, and during the time of the grading, in the gap between the grading contract, the grading permit and the building permit, require that every week, say, we were on site, we were grading these 3 days, we had a guy on site, here's his preliminary analysis. Then require a final report from the archaeologist and or Chumash monitor, depending on who's on site, prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy. So that way we pick up any grading work done after the building permit is issued, as opposed to issuing a building permit on it. The building permit and the grading permit aren't issued until there's contracts in place. And then we require a report from the monitors before we issue the certificate of occupancy. That provides us a hook to say, where's your report? And now I suppose there's some trust in there that we're trusting that they do those reports, but we have a hook, a powerful hook, is holding up the certificate of occupancy.
I do. Anybody in the council, you have further questions?
No, but-
I do have a further question. Mr. Beam, I'll get to you in a minute. Are we saying that those procedures weren't in place when they first went for their phase one?
Yeah, as I understand it, the city had no previous specific plan for complying with this condition.
Okay. And I would also like to like Mr. Wild's attorney, if he could speak on adding potentially that condition, or Mr. Wild.
And Mr. Mayor, I think what I laid out would be what we would expect to see in a compliance plan. The condition language I proposed accomplishes that goal, but if you want, we could be more specific, and we could write that into the condition if you wanted,
Okay.
or if the council wanted.
Okay. And if I could first have the attorney, and then I'll bring back Mr. Beam.
We'll ask my retired former colleague to. Well, kind of. Let me also add, you have inspectors that visit the site. They will be out there monitoring what's going on. With the condition that's been drafted, we're fine as it's written. But you also have the added element, surprise if you wish to call it that, of inspectors as often as you want to send them out there to make sure that, in fact, compliance is being had with this condition.
Okay. Mr. Beam?
Mr. Mayor, members of the audience, let me speak as best I can with an understanding of the practices involved, and I think Councilmember Haney hit it on the nose. The problem that you have is simply that detecting Native American cultural resources is not an exact science, nor is everybody trained in that particular field. So you could have a licensed archaeologist in the state of California that works in the Mojave Desert. The odds of them understanding the cultural resources of the Chumash tribe are zero. The goal of having a Native American monitor on site is, upon detection of something that appears to be a Native American cultural resource, which, as Ms. Thieding said earlier, under CEQA is treated the same as an environmental impact. The purpose is avoidance. Avoidance requires on-site monitoring by people that we know are trained to do on-site monitoring with respect to the particular culture involved. Let me read what the legislative finding is in AB 52 and see what the legislature says. The legislature finds and declares all the above. Because the California Environmental Quality Act calls for a sufficient degree of analysis, tribal knowledge of land and cultural resources issues should be included in environmental assessments programs that may have a significant impact on the environment. The legislature specifically states that it understands on a tribal by tribal basis that the resources involved may be different. The reason for a tribal monitor is because they are trained in understanding their resources. They have a seat at the table not only in the formulation of conditions of approval, but in the execution of them to avoid impact. Not to say, oh, let's stop everything, we have impact. That, by the way, from the standpoint of the applicant, probably works worse for them than having somebody on site who can immediately respond to the situation. So there's a specific reason for a Native American monitor on site during earth disturbance activities. What I'm hearing is, well, we may have a plan, we may have a program, it's sort of going to be like this, and it's sort of going to be like that. That's not sufficient. If you don't have a plan, then you don't yet have a condition of approval. If you do have a plan, that condition of approval has to be reviewed as part of the CEQA process by the tribal elders, period. That's what's required. That's the intent of AB 52. The easier way to do it is to agree you're going to have a trained Native American monitor for this tribe, and the two designated right here, and I'm sure there are others involved, include Mr. Atumame. That's the quick, efficient, and easy way to do it, and it's aimed at avoiding impacts, not saying, oh, we have an impact, what do we do? Everybody runs in circles. And as you know, you have few inspectors. And the likelihood of having any inspector that will even understand what a Native American cultural resource look like is zero. Okay?
Mr.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Clark?
We did supply a copy of condition number 41, and I think Mr. Beam's seen that, and I'm wondering if there's specific language that he's asking be changed in that condition.
Yeah, I want to see the details of a plan. But again, a plan is not the same as agreeing that you have the parties that you need who are capable of carrying out the plan. You need the right people to do it, or you risk impacts. This is not about what do we do after the fact, after we stumble onto something.
Have you seen condition 41?
I have not seen anything new. If you've written into that a Native American monitor, then I think the issue is solved. If you haven't, I think you still have an issue.
Where would you write that in? I guess the question was, what words would you change in that condition to do what you...
I don't think I've seen the new condition, Mr. City Manager.
One was presented at the previous meeting. There's been no change since
I didn't see an adequate statement as to a Native American monitor on site.
Well, let's do this.
Activities. I saw a reference to a plan.
We do gotta, let's do this, and thank you, Mr. Beam.
Question?
For Mr. Beam?
No.
No, okay, so we're gonna, I want to go to Miss, Ashton,
We've got the one as of June 9th.
and then I want to revisit this condition after we talk about their resolution or their potential agreement. So we'll get one, we'll go through this one first, and then we'll go through the next condition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and council members, my name is Susan Basham, once again, here on behalf of Joe and Linda Clark. As Mr. Summers reported to you, we have been working on a resolution to the issues that we raised on appeal. And before I address those specifically, I just want to cover a couple of procedural things. We understand that Mr. Wyrick has withdrawn his appeal, so that the only appeal under consideration tonight is that of the Clarks. I think that's correct. We also note, as Mr. Summers pointed out, we had requested that Councilmember Clapp consider recusing herself. We understand she has decided not to, so we just want to put on record our continued request. that letter that we wrote to her was written on June 12th, and I don't know that any of you received it until the middle of last week, but it should be a matter of public record. We also sent a letter on June 19th, which summarized a number of issues that have been raised in these proceedings that we don't think are immediately material here tonight. We think we're narrowing the focus rather than broadening it, so I'm not raising them, but I just wanted to point out that we did put a number of those issues on record in case they should become important. Concerning how this has gone for the Clarks, we said at the last hearing, or perhaps the one before, that our strong preference was to see you take the approach that was recommended as option 4 in a set of options that had been proposed by staff, which would have returned the matter to the Planning Commission for further work, with or without your direction as to what the work should be. In the effort to try to narrow the focus and bring this matter to conclusion, we began to look at how we could bring this to conclusion without sending it back to the Planning Commission, recognizing that there are a great many issues that have been raised here, many of them raised specifically by Councilmember Wyrick, that have to do with procedure, the history of the project, the way the Planning Commission made its decisions, and so on. And I was looking for a way, in working with Mr. Cohen, to bring this to conclusion that would give Mr. Weil the finality that he's looking for, while also giving the Clarks the assurance that they need. So that is how we got to the place where we are. And as Mr. Cohen reported to you, we have worked with a depiction of a line of sight. Is it all right with you if I pass this out to them?
We have it.
Different one.
You have a new one?
This is a depiction of this was a depiction prepared by the Warner Group on behalf of the Clarks. And it's hot off the press. It's gone through a few revisions, but I want to just call your attention to what the concept is here. This basically, if you look primarily at the third piece of this, the third tier, where it said proposed site plan, it shows the Clark's residence on the far left and a line of sight running over to the Weil property. And the two slices or cut-throughs above show the change in elevation. So what we were looking for was a way to put something in that line of sight that would give the Clarks the light and sound blockage that they're looking for. And what Mr. Weil has agreed to do, as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I believe we have agreed is that he will install on his property 4 olive trees. You'll see them depicted there as 4 round circles. This is generally depicted. There may be some slope issues or location issues, but they are to be 48-inch box trees when planted. They are to grow to and be maintained at 25 feet in height. And their purpose is to create a dense barrier. And those are in addition to the, whether it's called screening wall or fence, I'm not sure what it actually is. It's called fence here. I think that's what Mr. Weil prefers, but it is meant to be a dense fence, not a chain link or something like that. In other words, a barrier that serves the purpose of blocking light and sound to the greatest degree possible. So that's the concept. Now, what we tried to do then was put all of that into a new Condition 40, a revised Condition 40, and we had a small skirmish outside just before we began where we heard from Mr. Weil's attorney that they want to make some changes in the language that we had proposed. And I think that we probably will find that language acceptable, but I haven't seen it yet in writing. I don't think we're yet in a position to say with certainty that it's entirely agreed to. And so what I would suggest to you, with respect to Mr. Cohen and their desire to bring this to closure tonight, on behalf of the Clarks, I think what we would like to suggest is that you take option 2, which is your denial of the appeal and approval of Condition 40, with this, which makes direct reference to this plan, subject to the finalizing of language that's acceptable to the parties to be worked out by your city attorney. I would suggest that you provide that direction to him, and I think we would find that an acceptable result. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other comments, Mr. Weil?
I think so. I just have. Thank you again, everybody. Hi, everybody, and thanks again to Joe and Linda and Ms. Basham for everybody working very hard to work this out before tonight. It was a time crunch, so it's not unrealistic that the language is not completely set, but I think it's very close. I want to again address one thing about this, the archaeology report, which I have with me. This was prepared by Compass Rose, archaeologist, back in 2011 for David Berry. You guys know who David Berry was? Served on the Planning Commission for 6 years, City Council for 8 years. He was my original architect on this project, and I counted on David to set the stage for this project, which he did. He worked with me for the first 10 months before he was too ill to continue. And David commissioned all the studies, environmental, archaeological, soils, everything for this project. And again, I think David probably knew the general plan and the city processes better than anybody that I knew in Ojai, and this is why I chose him. So again, comments have been made in the past, I don't want to go back, but were the reports done right and were they done thoroughly and so forth? And the answer is yes, they were. And they were done completely. And this archaeology report, before we decide and before I agree to a condition where a tribal representative and an archaeologist have to be on site, I don't even know what a tribal representative charges. I mean, does anybody consider this? That this is an expense. This is a, we're a school, we're a little school with 75 students, and people seem to be tacking on, hey, let's throw this in and let's throw that in and let's throw this, and things cost a lot of money. And we can't just throw things in because somebody complains about it or somebody says they don't agree with certain things. This archaeology report says no cultural resources, either prehistoric or historic, were identified during the surface survey of the subject property, and no prehistoric sites have been previously recorded within or adjacent to the project area. This archaeologist, these two archaeologists at Compass Rose, are not recommending daily monitoring of the grading. This was taken on by the Planning Commission, another step beyond this report. So just to have an archaeologist on site during grading already takes us to another level that was not recommended by the archaeologists themselves. So now the discussion goes back to a tribal representative on site for God knows how many hours. I don't even know how much they charge. I'm already way past budget line with this as far as all of what this has cost me, as you can imagine. Architect, attorneys, studies, new studies I had to do, the story polls, and on and on and on. 6 months of time. I think this is enough. I think we've come to a nice resolution. This was the real issue, the light and sound from the adjacent property. We've addressed it. We've dealt with it. We're going to start grading. We'll have an archaeologist contract signed. We'll be ready for inspection anytime. We'll comply. That's not a problem. I'd appreciate it if you just take into account the level of this project. And we're not building a 7-story building. This is not some huge construction project. This is a small school project. Thank you so much.
I'm going to, yes, Councilmember Haney.
I'd like to address that,
Yes.
Mr. Well. I agree with you 100%. I'm not looking to have an archaeologist on site and a Native American Chumash on site. I think that'd be redundant. I don't think you need the archaeologist on site. I think your archaeologist should have done his Phase 1 walkthrough, written the report, just like you've read, and what we're saying right now is for movement of soil, you know, that was a visual walkthrough of the site. Now we're talking about disturbing the soil. Alls I'm trying to say is
This is Phase 1. This is a Phase 1 report.
Alls I'm saying is in that disturbance of soil, what I would like to, as part of the condition, is that we have a Native American rep on site when you're disturbing soil. I don't think you need an archaeologist. I think a trained Chumash rep looking at those issues would be better than an archaeologist. So I'm not asking you to just spend double the money. I wouldn't put that burden on you. And I wouldn't want that burden put on me. But I think that you can come to some type of an agreement between the archaeologist that you sign and the expectations that you agreed to and what you're going to require that archaeologist to do. And if he says, watch, I don't know what a Native American monitor charges, let's say they're $100. I imagine an archaeologist is a couple $100. If I had to choose between the two, I think I'd rather have the $100 guy there. I'd rather have the guy there that knows what he's looking at versus the guy that thinks he knows what he's looking at. That's all I'm trying to say.
I understand that, but
Okay.
what's been discussed is archaeologists plus tribal representative.
Okay, so
That's
then,
not,
if
that's what I heard.
I presented that, that's not what I wanted to present.
Okay.
Okay?
Mr. Weil?
Yes.
I do, if I want to ask everybody that's having a side conversation, to please refrain from speaking when we have a speaker on the podium. Last meeting, June 8th, I asked staff if there was an archaeologist on site for Phase 1. And they said there's no evidence of an archaeologist on site on Phase 1.
Correct.
That concerns me. And I think that, and I don't know why there wasn't, I don't know if it was.
I'll tell you why after you're done. I'll tell you why.
And you could answer that, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, my contractor, general contractor, Scott Lowen, thought, maybe incorrectly, that Pat was the representative that he should contact for monitoring. Again, Scott remembers contacting him, Pat doesn't remember being contacted. That's between them. But Scott, I entrusted my general contractor with this task. He said that was a condition written on the plans. He said it was on the plans. So he followed every other condition. I don't know why he wouldn't follow that one. But he said he had contacted Pat, and that Pat had looked at the site and said it doesn't need monitoring. We barely scraped the surface for Phase 1. It was we developed an already developed plot, and that was the purpose. So we understood that Phase 2 and 3 were really, those are the real meat. That's the meat of the project. So that was always understood. That's what we assumed. That's where the archaeologist or Chumash representative, we would absolutely. That's absolutely part of the condition. So we didn't circumvent this intentionally. We thought this was a little piece of the remodel, basically, and now the big piece. This is where the grading is. There was no grading for that. Like I said, we built the floor 2.5 feet above the ground. It's not in the ground.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyway, we intend to comply. We just don't want this to be overkill.
So if what I'm hearing Councilmember Haney saying, adding language that says, or instead of having an archaeologist, having a slash and saying, or tribal member, Chumash tribal member on site, potentially that conversation, with Councilmember Haney, you're open to that?
Well,
specific language?
I assume that we need a monitor, one way or the other. I don't believe we need two. I just don't.
Okay.
I refer that
Yeah.
back to
So,
Mrs.
Councilmember Clapp?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Weil.
Sure. Do you wanna-
Kathleen, you've had a lot of experience with archaeological and working with these people in the past, right?
Just.
Up in Morro Bay?
Yes, I did,
whatever.
up in
Yeah,
Morro Bay,
okay.
uh-huh.
So what is your take on what you think should be done?
Okay, so on condition number 33, which is CR1, that's a mitigation in their environmental document. My understanding, and Matt may disagree with me, is that it requires an archaeologist. Okay, you cannot modify a mitigation of an environmental document that's already had its routing and its challenge period to something less than. And a Native American monitor is less than. They don't have the professional qualifications that an archaeologist does. So you can't change that and make it less than without taking the environmental document and rerouting it out. Because this is a mitigation, but yet it's also a condition, right? You can add a condition and add a Native American monitor. There's no problem with that.
You can't remove the archaeologist.
No, so not unless you want to argue that they're the same, they have the same qualifications and the abilities to do the same thing. Because as he wrote in there, as he read to you, prehistoric and historic, the Chumash is looking specifically for the Chumash issues. However, as I said before, the way that I've always seen this implemented before is that it needs to be a city-approved archaeologist. That means that archaeologist needs to come to us. They come with a contract. They have their professional resume there. They're going to have to say that they're knowledgeable in Chumash culture. If they can't do that, If they can't find someone, that's why they have the Chumash monitors out there. They're really two halves of the same, of two people that serve the whole. Because the Native American monitor is not an archaeologist, and the archaeologist doesn't necessarily know everything that the monitor knows.
Which is why you request
You may.
from the archaeologist, or ask if they have knowledge in
It's just as Mr.
Chumash.
Bean said,
Right.
I mean, you may, at one point in time, someone may actually be an archaeologist who's a Native American. I mean, that may happen, that you find the same skill sets in one person. But an archaeologist does not mean that they are knowledgeable in the local Native American issues. So we didn't write our conditions this way up there. We wrote them that it needed to be an archaeologist, knowledgeable in, the Native American culture of the area, or have a Native American monitor out there. Because that's what you really need. You really need both. So that, I mean, it's for a short period of time on a job when they're doing the ground disturbing activities, but that is how you make sure that everything's being taken care of and there's not an interruption or like you said, something that happens.
Do you want to answer
I
to?
have a question.
Matt, to that, to what Councilmember Clapp asked, if we could actually add that or not?
It sounded like
Have it- do you-
Councilmember Haney had a question that we might want to hear question first before I respond.
Well, oh, no,
Or-
well, I heard that, I guess Ms. Wool's comment that Matt might disagree on if we could add that language in a mitigated, under the CR. Is that true, or?
The issue there is that this condition was imposed as a result of the mitigation and monitoring program that was done in connection with the initial mitigated negative declaration for the project's original approval back in 2012. Modifying that condition requires either showing that you're modifying it to be more stringent, or that there is substantial evidence supporting the modification such that the condition imposed associated with certain impact needn't be there anymore because that element of the project has been removed. In this case, of course, there's still grading required, so I'm not sure that there's a strong basis to remove the archaeologist condition because it was imposed not just as a condition by the Planning Commission, but as a mitigation requirement, mitigating a potentially significant impact, a potentially significant environmental impact, mitigating it down to a level less than significant via having an archaeologist on site, with the provision that a Chumash monitor be added should something be found. I'm concerned about removing the archaeologist requirement, but I understand the concern about not requiring two, given the expense, given the delay, et cetera. And I think that concern can be met by the point that Ms. Wold noted, that the archaeologist be qualified or knowledgeable about Chumash and other Native American cultural information and materials.
So you wouldn't suggest adding or Chumash tribal representative?
In short, I wouldn't suggest adding the or, but adding the and, I think would be acceptable.
Okay.
So the question I would ask is, how many archaeologists do we know in this region that are certified in Chumash Indian relics?
Like I said before, and just make this very clear, that generally speaking, archaeologists feel more comfortable having a monitor out there also. It's just kind of standard practice, what you see. I don't know if there would be one that he could engage. That's really between him and the archaeologist. But, since I've been here, I've only seen one or two, and Julie Tulumite and I were out there on the 1105 North Signal site, and they've had an archaeologist and a monitor. I mean, it just kind of is the way
Well, what I'm
they...
trying to do is I'm not trying to put limitations on Mr. Wild's ability to get this project done by not finding an archaeologist that's certified in Chumash Indian relics. So I kind of think you're putting Mr. Wild in a predicament that damned if he does and damned if he doesn't, because if we don't have one that is, now we're back to Plan B, which is, does that archaeologist, can he or she hire a Native American Indian monitor to come on site? And does that fee have to be in conjunction with the archaeologist's fee? And that's Mr. Wild's concern, and that's what we're trying to remedy here.
Okay, so all I can offer for that is that, as Mr. Wild said in his phase one did not indicate that it was likely that he would have anything. So if you based it on the premise of As he says, you take a site, you take its general location to known sites, then you have someone do phase one. If he had done a phase one, compass rose, they'd done a phase one, and they had seen something, they would have requested probably a phase two, or if there was some heightened likelihood that there would be something out there, then he would have said, I want these monitors on sites. That's would have been what would have come out of that document. So at this point in time, I wasn't here when this environmental document was done. These people felt that the archaeologist monitoring was sufficient, given the background that it wasn't a heightened site. It didn't have any heightened potential. Okay, so now at this point in time, I think we've had a lot of new information that maybe these people didn't know. I don't know what the situation was back then, where the tribe feels that it is more prudent to have someone out there. So that's really the conversation. If you feel that it isn't necessary because of his location, as he said, because of his phase one, then I think an archaeologist is fine, because they'll know when to stop and call a monitor. That's what she did out at 11:05. That's what they do. But if you want both of them there because it's a heightened site, then that's something that the city has to decide where the threshold is. But that is a cost of doing business in the city of Ojai. We have a lot of sites here, and that's going to be, you're going to hear this over and over and over again, that is just part of doing business in Ojai, is having the monitors and the archaeologists. I'm sorry.
Is it a heightened site or not?
It is not.
Yeah,
It is not. I'm sorry, did I misspeak? I'm just saying it is not a heightened site, as he said in his phase one. That's why they didn't do a phase two. That's why the condition is written the way it is. But at this point, there's been a lot of information about Ojai in general being a heightened city with lots of resources in it. So I guess it's really your decision on whether you think it's necessary for him to have both out there. But you cannot remove the archaeologist.
And Ms. Wold, just real quick, is there any documentation of anybody ever looking at archaeologists, like applicants? Because I understand, I don't think you were here when they did the phase one?
No, I wasn't, no.
Is there, in their file, is there any resume of any archaeologists?
No.
No.
I just said that, I think that it is, when we had the difficulty we had just recently with that you referred to, the site with not a monitor out there, I mean, it is really an education for the city of Ojai and the contractors and the people out doing this kind of work. This is kind of a learning curve for everybody to understand what it's all about. And I don't know that the city even has a preferred list at this point. So, we use the list that other counties have. There's, San Luis Obispo has one, and I think Santa Barbara has one. I'm not sure Ventura has one, but they have approved lists, and we would use that. And then we would also we would suggest to any applicant that came in, here's a list. Find someone that's willing to do the work in the time frame you need it done in, and then we'll look at their resume. And if they're not knowledgeable in this area, then you're going to have to do something to augment that.
Mr. Howard, I do have a question for you, because it seems like it's been both ways. I guess there was again, Mr. Summers. I did that last meeting too. I'm sorry, Mr. Summers. Is there, because it seems like there's the ball was dropped both by the Wilds and then also the city on monitor or making sure that this approval number 33 was met. Is there any? Would it be appropriate for the city to accept some of that responsibility moving forward? Meaning providing a tribal monitor on site?
That is possible. That would be a budgetary decision the council would have to make, because it would be committing the council's funds to the issue. It would also perhaps raise a gift of public funds issue. Mm-hmm. What's the broader public benefit to paying for a single applicant's portion of their project, where the site is a private site, not a public site?
And my question, I guess, because it seems like we made mistakes, obviously, and I guess the way I look at it, you just brought up public funds. I'm really not looking at it that way because the city itself didn't follow through with the conditions that we were supposed to monitor. So is there any other way of taking responsibility? I mean, is there any consequences that we would have to?
Self-imposed consequences.
Yeah, self-impose.
There's none that need be self-imposed. I think to some extent by allowing the project to move forward as I've recommended, because the lack of compliance with that condition doesn't constitute a sufficiently substantial condition to negate the previous approvals. In that regard, the city is giving up a right, or not giving up a right, but is acknowledging a reality. It would be a budgetary decision if the council wanted to pay for the Native American monitor on site, but I think we'd have to do a little bit more analysis of the gift of public funds issues.
Okay.
But to speak to your general point, even though the city was not as careful in monitoring compliance with the conditions as it should have been, that failure doesn't mean that it suddenly becomes the city's responsibility to comply with those conditions in the first place. The responsibility remains with the applicant, even though the city could have done better.
Okay.
And that's just a reality of land use condition compliance.
Okay.
The burden always remains on the applicant.
Okay. Okay, great. I'm gonna close a public hearing soon. If Mr. Beam.
Thank you, Mayor Laura. Let me make a point. My understanding is there was not adequate monitoring the first phase of the project. This is relatively small. So fortunately or unfortunately, from the standpoint of Native American cultural resources, the applicant didn't pay for the monitoring that the applicant should have had. Is that a correct statement from what we know of the record? Okay, so he's avoided that. But to suggest, I've talked to our tribal elder. The reality is that the tribal members have to be people that have cultural affiliation with a particular area. It's not an academic science, it's more in the field science. I've worked with tribal monitors in several different counties. They know the nature of the cooking goods, they know the nature of the hunting goods, they know the nature of fire pits, dwellings, and everything else that are part of their cultural tradition. That cultural tradition is not an academic science, it's more in the field science. Is that a correct statement, Patrick? So in practical terms, you need to consider that. So I think the applicant is saying, I don't want to have a monitor. My attitude is, you may not find anybody that would actually qualify to be both. Patrick has told me that he has in fact been a monitor, Native American monitor on sites that didn't have an archaeologist. The reality in the phase one is a surface survey. The reason that we care about earth disturbing activities is because we don't know what's below the surface, or in this particular case, the irony was that my understanding is the brush was such that only a small section of the site could be reviewed in the first instance. So you have a heightened risk of there being resources there that have not even been discovered because of probably what would be an inadequate review in the phase one. If you read your own record, that's what your record says. So I think from an equitable standpoint, you certainly have to have a Native American monitor on site. You just have to, because I don't think you're going to find anybody that can do that job. Whether you're going to run into something beyond that that requires an archaeologist, I couldn't speak to. One, and I think it's an equitable thing to suggest in light of the fact that the original conditions weren't met and no cost incurred with respect to them. Okay, that's not. I agree with your city attorney saying that's not the city's responsibility. It's unfortunate the city screwed up, but the applicant didn't pay for it either, so the applicant got a benefit that they shouldn't have had in terms of the cost involved. So that is the overall situation. But the reality is that what the law now requires, what the law now looks at, is not mitigation, but avoidance of impact. So if you have an impasse with respect to the kind of things you ought to be doing, in the overall CEQA process, the default position is in an impasse between the parties trying to work this out. The default position is avoidance. No, you don't have to deal with that here, but you just aren't going to touch that site until you figure it out. That's the default position under the current law. So it's been strengthened, in my opinion, having talked to a lot of people about this, in recognition of the fact that the old system wasn't working because you had Anglo archaeologists out there that didn't recognize the cultural resources. I've been there. I've been there in projects where they clearly they may be fabulous archaeologists, but they weren't necessarily trained in that. We have 2 archaeologists that work in our working group right now, just in Ojai, that are trained. Okay, one is a licensed California archaeologist. I wouldn't say that he would even state that he was necessarily a substitute for a Native American monitor. Okay, that's the reality of it. So I think having a Native American monitor has to happen. I'll leave it to you whether you think you can rely on the earlier phase 1. But let me point out, if you run into artifacts, I don't care what your CEQA document says, it's going to be treated as a significant adverse effect. And so you're going to have an event that's going to require probably new environmental review or some critical thing. I think most Native American monitors have the ability to discern between don't worry about this or don't worry about that and things that may be significant. My experience has been generally and specifically with these tribal elders is they're reasonable people in what they're seeking. There's a lot of projects in Ojai that they could have flat shut down under the old law, let alone the new law. So you need a Native American monitor, absolutely.
Thank you. Anybody else wanting to speak? Yes. And I'm going to take a couple more if members want to speak once more.
Thank you,
before
Mayor
I close
Laurie.
the hearing.
Tom Cohen, here on behalf of the Weil Academy. CEQA has been done on this project. It was done in 2012. It identified as a potential significant impact cultural resources. Mitigation measure was adopted. A condition was adopted. In the event that we run into a find when we do our grading activity, project stops, and the mitigation measures that are required are then implemented. End of story. The condition and the mitigation measure reads an archaeologist. Period. We can't revisit this. Number one. Number two, the disturbance that took place in phase 1 was a footing within the landscaped area of this already developed property. A footing, probably about 18 inches wide, it was about 20 inches long, and maybe 24 inches deep. It's a very small area. Now, we're talking about 4 tennis courts. What is that? About an acre's worth of land? About an acre's worth of land. This is not the same thing. Now, so I think this conversation needs to end. We have accepted a condition. We're willing to accept a condition as the city attorney has written it. And I think you need to deliberate on that. But we're not revisiting CEQA today. That's not what this is about. That's not what's permitted. Thank you.
Mr. Tumamite.
Patrick Tumamite, I don't know where you get the idea that vested rights pertain to you and only you.
If you could address the council.
Pertain to you and only you, Mr. Weil. Our vested right is over 13,000 years of occupation on this land before European invasion. And I want to remind you that we have lost an awful lot. There's millions and millions of acres out here. All we're trying to do is protect our culture, our people, and our resources within this valley, just this valley here alone tonight. A few dollars isn't going to change the world. It's not really going to change your life. You can go on. And I want to make a point here too. I have been hired as an archaeological native monitor many a times in the city of Ojai without an archaeologist at hand, when it should have been required by the city, by your own rules, to have an archaeologist on site. And I've been the only one on site to protect our culture. I've been on I've seen projects being destroyed by contractors. Recently on Saddle Lane, 251 Saddle Lane, where they completely destroyed an intact archaeological site. I had to come to the city of Ojai and complain. So what'd they do? They went ahead and had a monitor on site besides myself the following Monday, okay? not an archaeologist. They had a Native American monitor on site that following Monday, a person that I know of from Oxnard that's a Native monitor, okay? But not an archaeologist, just a Native American monitor. There again, no archaeologist on site. A few months later, because there was another development right down the street in Saddle Mountain or Persimmon Hill, they required that person that was building on a site in a particular piece of property there to have a Native American monitor on site. Did they require an archaeologist? No, but they did ask if I would be the Native American monitor to monitor that site. Come on, where's the trust? Where's the loyalty? Where's your decision-making coming from? Good Lord, I mean, like I said, we are not asking much from what's right to our people and our resources and our ancestry to protect what we have left. When I'm dead and gone, when he's dead and gone, the city is still going to pertain to having to follow the laws that you have written yourself and put in context that should be abided by you as adults, people who lead this city. That's all.
Thank you. Anybody else from public wanting to speak? Now, I'm going to close the public hearing, and we have a couple items on the table that we still have to, I guess, approve. And we do have an agreement. The first item is the potential agreement between the Clarks and the Wilds in terms of adding a fence or wall, however you want to call it, and trees for noise mitigation. That's the first item. Second item still on that we need to discuss as a council, I think is the archaeological and cultural link condition number 33. I know we've heard strong arguments from the Wild attorneys saying that there's limited things that we could do under this condition, and I think we've heard it from our attorney too, that we could only make it more stringent, and Mr. Wild's attorney said that the environmental impact has already been done. There's no reason why we should even be looking at this condition. But again, I guess it's up to us to either change that condition or not. And I would cautious us to look at that archaeological culture in a finance way. I don't think it's a good way of looking if we choose to modify this condition just because of finance. I think we should really look at it in a different perspective of having findings that would be appropriate other than finance reasons. Does that make sense? I guess, and so I guess I'm open to debate. I guess where I stand is we have a condition right now that requires archaeologists on site, and that archaeologist is supposed to be knowledgeable about the Chumash here in the area. And if we don't have an archaeologist that is educated enough that's knowledgeable about the Chumash, then I guess the default is going with the Chumash representative. Is that correct?
The trouble with that approach is that the condition and the underlying mitigated negative declaration require an archaeologist. And the focus there was on both Chumash resources and other potential resources. I'm not sure, although it's a little unclear to me, but are we categorically sure that there's no archaeologists that exist that meet this goal?
I don't know.
Well, I guess that's not even the question, though, that we should think about, right? I'm trying to look at the process of protecting the Chumash resources, potential items.
And on that goal, I think your options are a couple. One would be to leave the conditions as they are now, not add the proposed additional condition 41, and rely on staff and the inspectors to verify compliance, and rely on staff to approve an archaeologist, with the understanding that that approval would be look at, do they have Chumash knowledge and ability? And if one can't be found, then they would approve an archaeologist generally qualified. Option two, so that's the do nothing option. Option two would be to add the condition as I've drafted it, proposed condition number 41, which maintains the same requirement that it be an archaeologist during earth disturbance, and then adds a Native American monitor should something be found. That would also require a detailed plan, as we talked about, for compliance with that condition, which would require that the contract be approved prior to the issuance of a grading permit, and that a report be submitted to the city prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. Again, the goal would be to find an archaeologist who is knowledgeable about Chumash issues. Third option would be to have the same condition and add a requirement that a Chumash monitor be present during earth disturbance in addition to an archaeologist. And again, with the requirement that there be a plan in place as to what that will look like, and requiring the contract in place as of the grading permit and a report as of the certificate of occupancy. Those two both being conditioned upon those steps being made. I think that's the universe of your three options. As you've heard, Mr. Beam is asserting that the condition, the third option be taken and the condition be modified to directly require not just a plan, but compliance, hiring of Native American monitor. And Mr. Cohen, attorney for the Wilds, has asserted that only option 2 could be done, which would be maintaining the same requirement as is now for an archaeologist with a Native American monitor only if something is found. But they are acceptable to the proposed requirement for a compliance plan, I think in part in recognition of the fact that one wasn't done before. I think that's the universe of your options. And
Okay.
Unless I've missed one, let me know.
Any questions for staff from council on any of those options?
I just want to repeat it back to you. So, 1, we leave it as is. 2, we condition it with condition 41, that they have an archaeologist and they have a plan. Okay, and then number 3 is that we require that they have an archaeologist, they have a plan, and they have a Native American monitor on site. Those are the 3 options I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions for staff? And I guess I get to turn it back to council. I mean, it's definitely up to us to decide if we want to
Okay,
modify this condition or not.
okay. So we have 2 issues. The proposal before us with the Clarks and the proposal about how to handle future monitoring. This should be broken up into 2 motions, I would assume.
They would all have to, in the end, be part of the adoption of the same resolution, but I think it could be a motion to approve the resolution with the condition added, and then we would then have a motion to add a further condition on the wall, or actually break it up, it'd be motion to approve the resolution, and then have 2.
Approve the resolution.
I think they were
Denying-
deny the appeal and
No.
Approve the
the
resolution
appeal.
denying the appeal and approving the project with added conditions, and
Right.
then you'd then discuss these 2 big conditions at issue independently, approve or reject each of them in turn, and then act on the resolution as a whole.
Okay.
I guess we could start with item number 1.
Yeah,
And-
I was prepared to
Yeah.
make a motion.
Okay.
Good.
Are you good with it? Okay. All right, help me out here, Matthew. I would like to move to, okay. This is convoluted at best.
Way too many of these.
Okay. I move to deny the appeal and approve. Help me, which one would it be?
Second.
I
It
think
would
it'd
be
be
the
option
second
number
one.
2.
and approve DRP 11-05 RV02 with one or more of the added conditions. Now, that's where I need help, the added conditions.
And that's where I would suggest that the motion be to approve, deny the appeal and approve DRP RV 1105, DRP 1105 RV2 as set forth in the draft resolution in attachment A with the added conditions, and then here the added conditions are 40 and 41.
Okay.
And then we could take those
So we go ahead
separately.
and put the cultural in there with it?
Well, I think you could take them separately if you wanted. I'm not sure which one you wanted to do first.
I think I would like to keep them separate and just
Okay.
do the one. Okay, so, you got that, Rhonda? Are you comfortable with that? Should we read it back, or?
Does that,
No, I'm comfortable.
She has
you're
it
comfortable
written
with
down.
that?
I
Okay.
don't have the resolution, though. Do we have one?
It's in attachment A from the last packet?
Yeah,
Okay, the big,
The fat one,
it's-
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there was a thin packet for this one, and the main packet is the fat packet from last meeting.
Yes,
I'm comfortable.
And we'll,
Mr. Mayor, point of order, I hope you're not, I may be not understanding Mr. Summers correctly, but I don't think you should be voting on the resolution until you've decided on the conditions that are going into the resolution. I would just take issue with that. We'd like to have a full discussion on which conditions are going in before you actually approve the
yeah,
whole of the
that's
thing.
what I was trying to get, those
Thank you.
conditions also added into the motion.
right, and I think the vehicle to do that is first to move to approve the resolution, then,
Okay, why don't we do that, and then we'll move on to the next one?
yeah, and then a substitute motion to add a condition, or amend the motion to add a condition, take each amendment in turn, and then approve the final.
Okay.
Because I agree with Ms. Basham that we should talk about the conditions first, and then the broader resolution.
Okay,
So the first one would be to move to approve the proposed resolution,
of the city council denying the appeal,
correct?
period.
And then
Okay.
that needs a second.
Okay, then we need a second and vote, and then we'll go on to the
But we won't vote
conditions.
yet. It'd be a second, and then it'd be discussed.
Okay.
The conditions
Oh, and
won't
then
be
that's when we add
discussed.
the
Then
conditions.
that's when
Okay.
when someone would, I move to amend the motion
Right.
to add condition number,
Okay,
whatnot.
Okay, excellent. Okay,
Sorry
so
for
we
not
need a
clarifying that up
second,
front.
and then we can add, okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the conditions.
Yeah, so now I would suggest,
Conditions set forth in,
Condition 40?
Yeah.
well, I want to do the archaeological separate.
Okay. Well, yeah, 40 is the
40
screening.
oh,
40 is the
40
wall,
screening,
and
41 is archaeological.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, so should we add as a condition that the applicant shall build a screening wall along the edge of the subject property along Pope Lane in compliance with the design to be approved by the planning commission prior to the issuance of a building permit for the project, is what 40 reads? Or do we want it to do the plan agreed on by
I thought we were talking about the agreement.
the Clarks
Yeah.
and the
Not-
Wiles?
yes.
Right.
Rather than what was written here in 40?
Yes.
And on that, I would suggest that, I understand the concern about not having final language, but I'm also concerned about the council adopting a resolution with language that doesn't exist. So I think we should think about how to, I realize you haven't ironed out all the details, but I'd like to get some language that's set here with the details to be further approved by the CDD and the parties, rather than the language of the condition to be further approved by the parties and the city. That way, the city council isn't approving a resolution that is itself undefined. Does that concern make sense? And
Yeah.
council as well?
Mr. Mayor and Mr. Summers, it makes sense, but in order for us to have really final language, you'd have to take a break. We need to work it out here now. We have several issues we had a complete draft that we brought with us tonight. Mr. Cohen asked for several changes. Those are not in writing, and we could put those in front of you if we took the time to sit down and work them out, I suppose.
The technology, we have it drafted. We did want to tweak one thing. Let me,
I do have
Maybe
a
read this.
suggestion.
we can read this into the record if you wish.
Yeah, but we have not, you and I have not yet agreed on what
Understand.
that says, so.
I'm thinking
There's
maybe,
one item. that we
Right.
were-
maybe
Take a
what they
break.
could do, we could take a break, or they could go, and we can move on to the other cultural element.
They might want to be
They wanna
present.
be
for
Oh, you might
discussion
want to
of
be
that item.
present for the cultural, of
So
course.
maybe a
Yeah, okay.
10 or a 15-minute
Yeah,
break?
let's do that. That makes sense to me.
Do you
5
need?
minutes is-
5 minutes?
5 minutes? Okay.
Great.
Mr. Mayor?
Great. Yeah, we'll take a break.
A 5-minute recess?
That was a good catch. Yeah, we're waiting for the copies, and then we'll go back live after the copies. From the break.
Can you give us a minute to read it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, let's do-
Never mind.
One fruiting olive trees, I wouldn't go with fruiting. He'll regret that.
Yes, Mr. Summers?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While the council is reviewing it further, I think the language is acceptable. I only have one suggested change, which is
Just a second, please.
Okay, we're going to reconvene the appeal. And Mr. Summers?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One suggested modification to this language is at the bottom, where it says reviewed and approved by the city in handwriting, it be as reviewed and approved by the city's community development director.
Is that okay with the applicant and Mr. Wall? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I had one other question.
Councilmember Haney?
On the, are we submitting this as part of the proposal?
Yes.
Okay, and so I just had one question. I've got 4 olive trees on it, and you have language in here about court number 3 and, yeah, I just wanted to clarify if what trees you're moving or what trees you're keeping in line, just so we could just write on one of them and we can turn that in.
The plan isn't being modified in any way.
Okay.
The plan is exactly
as
as
is.
presented. The condition complements it.
Okay, and so then the other question is you crossed out originating as 48-inch box specimens at the time of planning? Does that mean that you're not conditioning
No,
as 48-inch
because there's
box?
an insert. That's a little confusing. Mr. Cohen preferred an insert, which will read above. You see my handwriting above?
48-inch box trees which upon normal mature growth will. Okay, all
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
right. All right.
Any other questions? No, with that, then we'll continue trying to finalize our motion with this condition, And
And
we
this is,
were,
and this is condition 40.
yes, condition 40, we were on page 2 of 8, where we were talking about the screening wall, and we wanted to insert this language.
So then it would
I mean,
go-
40, sorry, 40.
And to answer Councilmember Haney's question, the plan does note that the 4 proposed trees are proposed as opposed to existing.
Okay.
So then we have approved the denial of the appeal and moving on to the conditions, which would be,
We haven't yet voted on the approval. It was a
oh,
motion.
that's right, we just
Nothing,
seconded.
no decision has been made yet.
So now I add the conditions.
Yeah, now the motion would be to,
Also include with one or more of the added conditions. And may I say, submit the motion as written?
I think it'd be condition 40 as submitted by counsel for Ms. Basham and Mr. Cohen. Because the record would be clear that it would reflect the submission, the written
Okay.
submission from tonight.
Okay.
Also with the change of approved by the city
Community Development Director.
community director.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, there's one condition, and then you said, Mr., almost said, Mr. Summers, you said that ultimately we have to also add if this council decides to change number 41, we have to add it with this motion, right? Or this.
I would suggest doing it as amendments that are voted on separately. So now you'd vote.
Okay,
so there was
now vote for this,
an
just
motion
this
to-
amendment.
Yeah, so it'd be a vote on adding this condition, then a separate motion to amend the resolution to add the cultural resources condition to look like how you want it to look, vote on that, and then you'd vote on the final reso.
Okay, so if we're clear on the condition, could I get roll call?
Clap,
Yes.
Haney,
Yes.
Laura.
Yes. The second item then is a cultural resource protection, and I want to bring it back to council to see if we want to do either leave it as is, go with option number 2, which Mr. Summers explained, of basically having a process where we verify that if there's any cultural resources found, that there's going to be the appropriate steps to make sure that we preserve those, but we're not adding Shumash representative under that option. And the third option is just to add a representative, Shumash representative, along with the archaeologist.
I have one more question for Mrs. Wool. As part of the planning, are you going to have the general contractor for the Wiles project contact building and safety the day that they are going to excavate? Or are we gonna, or are we gonna rely on us driving by and seeing that they're excavating?
So generally what will happen is whatever contractor that's going to pull the grading permit, that's the first point of where they do earth disturbing activities. They have to have the contract into us, that they have whatever you guys decide, whoever's supposed to be out there. And then, as I said previously, because it hasn't worked out in the past for us to ensure that that really gets taken care of, we implemented this policy where we're going to go out and do a pre-construction meeting. So they're not going to be moving anything without the building. That's going to happen before they start doing anything. So they're going to advise them of the person that's on the backhoe, the grading contractor, as well as the general. It doesn't do any good, really. I mean, we found that was the problem with the last issue we had, was it doesn't trickle down to the very person who's the grading contractor. So that's the kind of the policy we've decided right now. And then from there, we would.
Okay, so I guess I'll ask the question again.
Okay.
Not what you've done in the past, what you think you're gonna do.
Uh-huh.
I understand the walkthrough process, I understand the meeting of the parties.
Right.
That takes place on Monday. And Wednesday, we put the crew together and we're gonna start disturbing the earth. Do they notify you
No.
Thursday morning when they fire up an excavator or a tractor?
No.
Okay, so I'm saying, I'd like to see I'd like to see how we're gonna inspect, again, if we're inspecting on trust. well, they'll notify us, or they'll call us, and I just don't have a sense based on the past experience, and not with Mr. Weil, but with his general contractor. And I'm under the impression with some of the general contractors in town in general, they're just not in this communicative mode to let us know what's going on, and I want to prevent that. So to me, we've got to do two things. One, we condition this project that the minute someone puts a shovel in that ground, on the grading aspect of this project, that we have an American native monitor. Two, I'd like to see that the minute we put that shovel in the ground, that someone notifies one of our inspectors so that we can actually come out to ensure that there's either a Native American monitor on site or there's an archaeologist on site. So I'd like to condition it that way also. So, Mr. Summers, if that's too much, let me know.
I think if the council finds that the history of this project with the previous lack of compliance with the requirement for an archaeologist demonstrates a continuing concern for the issue, then there's a sufficient basis to require the addition of a Native American monitor in addition to the archaeologist. And it would then be reasonable to add the condition that the appropriate notifications be given to staff. I think that's acceptable.
Any other comments? I'm looking at this as also an issue of making sure that we do our due diligence as a community when we're moving the earth and trying to conserve our Chumash heritage here in the Ojai Valley. And because of the lack of follow through, I think that finding alone, we need to condition number 41 to add a Chumash tribal representative. And I'm looking at it at that standpoint only, and I think we need to start now, and it's appropriate, I think, and only when it's earth disturbing, only when they're doing activities. I haven't thought about necessarily going to the extent of notifying our staff, but I get the valid concern there because there's no way of verifying it unless the Chumash representative is there and comes. But then again, that doesn't. I guess I could support that.
Well, what we're relying on right now is we're relying on the developer, who's not going to be on site all the time. He's running a business. He has other things that are important to him. Two, now we're relying on the developer's representative, which is the general contractor, which in the past hasn't been our best source of getting the right information. The next thing is we're talking about an archaeologist. And prior to that, we're talking about maybe one of our building inspectors driving by going, oh, they're opening up the earth today, maybe I should stop by. So I think all of it is just having the proper amount of eyes on the earth to prevent something negative from happening to the American Native Indian people in this community and for the cultural resources of this community. I guess that's what I'm saying. So,
if no more comments, then I'll entertain a motion or a condition amendment to the.
A motion amending the previous motion to add.
Motion to amend the previous motion to add this condition.
To cultural resources protections, number 41.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds like you're in the market for additional language as well.
Right. That we'd like to add the additional condition that in their plan that they notify building and safety of any earth do we want a 24-hour notice or a date or the day of notice? What would be better for you?
Well, can I ask, are you wanting them to tell us every time they're out there? Because often they stop. If you drive by the construction site over on West Ojai, you'll see they're stopped. Then they'll start again. I mean, so they'd have to notice us every time they're doing earth disturbing activities? Is that the point, or the first time they start?
First time.
Oh, just the first time they start, okay. All right, yeah, that's fine, 24 hours
24
notice
hours.
is fine.
Okay. And that too, that obviously in the condition, we already have that they're going to have an archaeologist on site.
Yeah.
And 3, that during this earth disturbance, that we have a Native American monitor on site.
I'll second. Any further discussion?
Discussion? I would be comfortable with a Chumash representative being called if something is discovered, because my understanding is that the archaeologists that come to these sites and grading sites are highly educated in archaeology.
Yes, I mean, that's what they are, an archaeologist, and usually the ones that I've worked with here, I mean, I haven't have a long experience here in history, but yes, they know the area well. And that's how it works sometimes on some jobs, like you said, you know, you would have an archaeologist out there, and then if they see something that they are suspect about, they stop, and they call the Chumash out.
And in the CEQA, the CEQA, was it the CEQA, the phase 1, could I call Mr. Cohen up? Is that appropriate or not? May I?
Yeah, if it's a
For
specific
is that okay?
Specific question.
For clarification, you said that the phase 1 said there was no,
That's correct. The phase 1 is read by Mr. Weil in the report, pardon my voice. It said that nothing was found, that's why phase 2 was not done.
required.
Correct.
So they felt that it was not a highly, there's a name for it. A high,
Not sensitive, it was
Yeah.
not within an area where there were other known, findings of other archaeological or Native American resources.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay?
No, we're not going to
Because of-
have, we're going to have,
Because of that, I would be comfortable with it staying as, if something is discovered, a representative from the Chumash tribe is called.
the only concern with that, in my point of view, is that I think there's a difference between an archaeologist and a Chumash tribal representative, or even archaeologists in another area where there's Native Americans, because in my concern is that they're not experts on the culture of that tribe, and there could potentially be something under the earth, and an archaeologist can make a mistake and not identify that item as belonging to a Native American, or in this case, the Chumash tribe. And that's, I just want to make sure that, I think we have to respect that. I think we have to avoid, and you never know, there might not be anything of the Chumash while they're doing their whole grading, but I think it's better to avoid that and have potential resources lost. And I think that we need to begin now. I think we haven't, as a city, done a good job protecting their items, and that this is really the only way to ensure that we identify it if it comes up. And then an archaeologist, whether it's like, in my opinion, it's like a professor that has all these degrees, but when it has to do with the specific area, you need that expert in that expertise in that area to be able to identify anything that belongs to them. We can't just, I guess, I think that it would better suit us if we had a Chumash representative there looking out, because they know best of what could could arise from earth-disturbing a project or movements. And I don't feel comfortable that an archaeologist could identify everything that is a Chumash culture.
Mr. Mayor, you know, this is one of the most sensitive cultural resources that we have in this valley. Period. And we should be doing everything that we can possibly to preserve it and protect it, period.
So I see your point of view, but I think that it's going to be only during the grading process, and I think adding that extra eyes could potentially just assure that we don't miss anything. And I don't think we're asking for too much more. I think, again, it would suit us as a city to add this extra condition.
I agree.
And with that, if there's no further discussion, then I'll take a roll call.
Clapp,
Yes?
Haney,
Yes.
Laura.
Yes. And with that, I'll adjourn. Oh, no.
You need to vote on the overall resolution
Oh, the overall resolution.
as
Okay.
amended.
As amended. So we voted on the conditions of the resolution.
And,
Okay.
yeah, on the two amendments to the resolution. So now the package
I'll-
before you, which would require, we had our motion, we had our second, it's been amended twice. Now, the item before you is a motion to approve the resolution in your packet as modified with condition 40 and 41, which denies the appeal, approves the Wild Tennis Academy project, DRP 1105, revision 2, as modified. It requires a unanimous vote.
So I move,
You don't need to move.
no,
It's already been moved and seconded.
Okay.
It's just,
I'll just do roll call.
okay, roll call.
Clapp,
Yes.
Haney,
Yes.
Laura.
Yes. And with that, any further comments? It's done. With that, I'll adjourn the meeting.
thank you.